Welcome, football fans, to Saturday Showdown, the ultimate touchdown for your college football fix. Each week, we'll dive into the hottest games, standout players, and pivotal moments that define the season. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just tuning in for the first time, we got all the stats, stories, and insights to keep you at the top of your game. So grab your favorite snack, get comfy. It's time to kick off another episode of Saturday Showdown.
College football fans, welcome back into another episode of Saturday Showdown. We are joined tonight by Adam and Harrison from Southern Rivals College Football Show. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Thank y'all for having us so much.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome. Sweet.
I was about to say, it was another week full of upsets and interesting college football. That just continues to how this crazy seasons have been, almost a lot of comparison back to 2007 and how crazy that season was. And it seems like we're there, and if not, going further. Yeah. The big ones this week is, you had Miami losing to Georgia Tech. I mean, if you think about it, this is the second time Georgia Tech's done that, beating Notre Dame, beginning of the season to kick things off. You had Ole Miss upsetting Georgia, as much of an upset you want to call it, two top-ranked teams. And, this top 25 is growing crazier week by week. You have Indiana sitting at number 5. If you would have told me before the season began Indiana's going to be 10-0 and sitting in the top 5, I would have said you're crazy. So, initial thoughts on this week 11 of college football?
Harrison, you go
ahead. I was going to say it. We talked about it on our show. A lot of people complaining about there's not enough parity in college football. And I don't know if the college football gods heard all the fans griping about that before this season, but my gosh, it is here, and it feels like it's here to stay. And across the country, you have conferences. I know the Big 12 before the season kicked off, we were talking about how wide open it seemed like that was going to be. Who would have thought that the rest of the conferences, especially, were going to be so wide open? I think the least wide open one, you would argue maybe is Big Ten. But then again, you have a team like Indiana storming out of nowhere, leading the charge as one of America's favorites and Cinderella stories. But SEC is just beating each other up. It's a mess right now. ACC, we thought we had it figured out. Then Miami loses. So SMU is in first place. Who would have thought that their first year in? It's crazy to say the least, but I think we're all here for it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I just love how unpredictable it is. Obviously the last few years, there's just been dominance by, 4 to 6 teams maybe. And now it's completely unpredictable week in and week out. Who's going to kind of take the reins in their conference or take the reins in their division? If those even hardly exist anymore, I guess, at this point. But, I'm all for it. I love the chaos we're already seeing in November, just like I told Harrison on our show and offline as well. I think we're in for some more chaos these next couple of weeks, and it's going to be a blast to watch and see it all hashed out.
Well, especially if you think about it, too, you have the SEC that this is the first year with no divisions. It's straight up like the Big Ten is, where you did have East and West, and, now it's top 2 teams no matter what. So, you could have, quote unquote, 2 East teams or 2 West teams filter the top there. But, your thoughts there too, Dillon?
Yeah, it's just crazy. I haven't seen anything like this for a long time. Like you said at the beginning of the show, if you told me that Indiana is going to be top 5 undefeated, Army is going to be ranked in the top 20, you have Colorado ranked in the top 20, who's actually, dare I say, a decent football team. And then if you would tell me Tulane was going to be ranked at all, I wouldn't have pictured any of this happening. I think the thing I like about this most, especially with the 12 teams extending, and this year maybe more than others to come, you don't know who's going to win. You probably have your picks, but like some of these guys who are going to get in these playoffs have not played each other. Maybe haven't seen that type of scheme. Maybe are unprepared. So when I was watching College Game Day, I was watching the halftime show. A lot of those guys are just like, this is crazy because you just don't know who's going to win. Teams are losing when they shouldn't. Some teams, even though they may be undefeated, they haven't played anybody that's worth playing. Some teams just aren't as good as what we thought they were going to be. It's going to get wild when it gets down to the college playoffs, and you got some of these 12 teams. it's going to be it's going to be a wild playoff. It is.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. And the confusing thing, especially if you look at it this week after the rankings and everything, you have, for winning, you have a Boise State team get dropped in the rankings by a spot for just winning their game and, taking care of business, some like other teams. So, we like to call it here our weekly Ashton Ginty update here with Boise State. He is continuing that incredible run he is having this week against Nevada. 34 carries, 209 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. This man is, on a mission, and, I don't know if he's going to 100% do it, but, he's getting close to hitting that mark from Barry Sanders set several years ago.
Yep. Like 1988, I think it's that record. That record's been standing for most yards by running back and touchdowns in the season, rushing touchdowns. I think Barry
I was about to say, on the
38.
season, he's at 224 carries for 1,734 yards and 23 touchdowns, averaging 7.7 yards a carry.
My gosh.
That's insane.
It's rare.
Great weapon to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare. I mean, what Barry Sanders had like 28 or 2,900 rushing yards and like 38 touchdowns in a season. So I mean, you don't see people like this very often.
No.
He's got 3 games left.
Jeez.
I tell you, I love his starting stance when he lines up in the backfield.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Love that.
He just stands there like
Yeah.
It's so intimidating to look at. I don't know. I honestly don't know what I would do if I looked up and this dude just standing straight up, staring you down. I don't know.
Oh, God.
He's just calculating who he's going to run over.
Exactly. Very premeditated.
Man's a serial killer.
I was about to say the biggest thing with him, I'll be interested to see where he, finishes the season. I think it's going to be a close toss-up between him and Travis Hunter for the Heisman.
Yeah.
I was going to say you might can throw Cam Ward up there, but, with that loss, that kind of hurts his campaign a little bit there. Now, if he battles back and gets him to the playoffs and, maybe wins the ACC, you can still throw him up there for, just statistics-wise, he's having an insane season, but – I think that's just part of it when you look at the voting and, they take into consideration what the team does as well and how crucial he is there. But, we'll just jump right over to that game. Miami loses to Georgia Tech this week, 28-23. Initial thoughts on this game. Cam Ward goes for 348 and 3 touchdowns, so it's not like he just has a bad game. But yeah.
I feel like with that game with Miami, we've seen it. We talked about it offline before the show started. Like Miami, it seems like everyone was kind of waiting for this loss to happen, and it finally did. And just like we were talking about, I mean, they just got demolished in the rankings. They dropped 8 spots. AP, we'll find out how much they drop in the playoff rankings when they come out. But it just seems like Miami is the one team this year that is capable of like losing, being down at halftime to Duke like by 20 points, and then the only team capable of just storming back and dropping 50. I mean, they're very polarizing as far as what they're capable of. Their ceiling and their floor, I guess you'd say. But yeah, with Cam Ward, he's an incredible piece of their offense. But I think this game humbled them, and we'll see if it humbles them to the point where they can figure it out. Obviously, there's only a few games left. They gotta right the ship and patch the holes, as you say. But this is a type of game that I think was on the horizon. It was just kind of a matter of when. And for Georgia Tech, I mean, they've always been a dangerous team, especially having Haynes King back, who is electric. And you just asked Miami of last year how electric they are. Yeah, I mean, it's not too surprising to me that it happened, especially Georgia Tech. But this Miami team, I mean, they're capable of so much and they're capable of so little at the same time. I guess you'd say that.
Yeah, I feel like it was a matter of.
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
That Georgia Tech team is always due to ruin someone's month or even portion of the season. They always happen to do that. And to your point as well, Harrison, Miami was due for this numerous times when they got out of the skin of their teeth. They got out of it. The Virginia Tech, even at Louisville, and the Duke game as well. They stormed back and ended up winning that one pretty convincingly there at the end. But I think for me, what was impressive for Georgia Tech was their ability just to control the line of scrimmage and to just have their way with Miami. I mean, it almost kind of felt like we were watching the old Paul Johnson days and the triple option almost of Georgia Tech just grounding and pounding the football for 271, I believe is what it was, on the ground. Having Haynes King back obviously was a huge boost for the Yellow Jackets. He's a phenomenal quarterback, a great pickup for them last year through the portal. So I'm curious to see how Miami responds. My kind of far-fetched opinion, I think when they go to Syracuse in a few weeks, I would be shocked to see something happen then too. But they were due for one, and as a Clemson fan, pretty pleased with the result in this campaign.
Yeah, I was going to say it seemed like Miami's luck just finally ran out. Like you mentioned, all the close games they'd been in, you think Virginia Tech, Cal, Duke, all those games that, they had to fight back to win. And finally, they make the mistake here late and Cam Ward fumbles the ball with, seconds left. And, that gives Georgia Tech the opportunity to run a clock out. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how Miami does, respond after a tough loss. They've got Wake Forest coming up next at home. So, they get to go back home. 4-5 Wake Forest team that's 2-3 in conference, coming off of a loss to Cal by 10. So this should be a get right game for Miami, and I think that's going to be the tale of how the rest of the season could go. Is how do they right the ship, and can they get back in the winning column? And plus, at this point, they're going to have to count on somebody losing, because if you look at under SMU, because SMU leads the conference now. You've got Miami and Clemson are the next two up right there, that especially with Pitt losing to Virginia. I think it's going to be SMU versus either AC or Miami or Clemson, and it's going to be interesting to see which one it is.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on something Harrison said too. I think this game, I don't want to blame it all on Cam Ward. I don't, but you could definitely see where his pride got the best of him with a minute. I think it was like a minute 13, minute 30 left. They're on their own 15-yard line. They have a chance to drive up and win the game, and you can definitely tell his pride got the best of him, and he 100% got humbled. He tried, it was first down, second down. He tried making something, stayed in the pocket way too long, refused to get rid of the ball. Defender came up from behind him, hits him, drops it, fumbles the ball. Georgia Tech recovers. That's basically the end of the football game. So it's definitely this is definitely a learning experience for him. I don't think he's really been put in that situation where he makes a huge mistake late in the game like that cost the whole game. So I know they're playing Wake Forest next, and obviously it should be that should be a gimme game. Yeah. But I'm really interested to see how he's going to recover from. I'm sure he's beating himself up saying, if I would have just got rid of the ball, if I would have did something different. So I'm kind of interested to see how Cam Ward is going to recover and the next game coming forward, because I feel like a play like that, if you don't mentally recover well enough, it definitely could start to maybe take a toll on your play style. And, yeah, I definitely think he got humbled, and honestly, it probably wouldn't be the worst thing for him, to be honest. It probably would help him out, if anything.
Yeah, in a game like that, we've talked about on our show and stuff that you can't let a game beat you more than once, and that'll be Miami's task ahead of them. They can't let this affect them going forward, because as you mentioned earlier, Caleb, like Miami has no room for error. If they're wanting to stay in the title race, I think that if they're outside of the title race, they're going to need help, and they're going to need maybe a little bit of luck to bounce their way to get into the playoffs still, just because of other teams ahead of them. And you have the Big Ten and SEC. They're going to get probably the first looks of the extra teams to get in. So if you're outside of the title, you're not in the best position for a playoff race.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, at least for them too. And I believe, according to the tiebreaker scenarios, they're still the top two. SMU's number one now with being undefeated in the conference, and Miami's number two. So Miami has to lose one more conference game to be out. So, I mean, of the championship game in Charlotte. So they're still definitely in the hunt. As long as they win the game in Charlotte, they should be in. But if they lose that ACC championship game, that's when we're going to kind of hope for some of the dominoes to fall ahead of you there. So, yeah, I agree that at this point, there is no more margin of error.
No.
Yeah. And staying on the track of upsets, we'll jump from the ACC to the SEC, where Ole Miss upsets Georgia 28-10, where, I said this the other day to one of my buddies. I said, it looks like to me that Georgia has a Carson Beck problem.
Yes.
And, and Dillon and I, even on our show, talked about this at the beginning of the year, that we thought it could have been a 2-quarterback race for the Heisman coming into the season between Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers. That was two of the top names being thrown out there, and that the game in Austin between these two would kind of be a defining game. But these last few games for Carson Beck, it's really seemed like he's very unsure and has been making questionable decision making with the football. And I don't know what Georgia has to do, at least with him, to get back on track, because talk about not making any more mistakes. They dropped in the polls, and if they're wanting to even try to get, there's going to have some crazy stuff have to happen in the SEC for them to get back up there. But I mean, what do you guys think? Where do you go if you're Georgia here? Do you still lean in on your veteran quarterback in Carson Beck, or if you're Kirby Smart, where do you go?
I was going to say, Adam, you want to take that? We talked about this in our show today.
We did exactly this. Yeah, I think you're at this point in the season now where it's kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think at this point, with it being so late in the season, you've got to just lean into your veteran and just kind of hope that with the reps, the experience that he's got, at some point it kicks into your favor. I think it's too much of a gamble to go to your 2 or even, heaven forbid, your 3 for whatever reason. So obviously for Texas A&M, just use that as a quick example with Marcel Reed kind of plugging in with Connor Whiteman situation. That's a little bit different, I think. But with this Carson situation with Georgia, I think if you're Kirby, you got to keep rolling with them and just kind of hoping some dominoes fall your way and some things start breaking his way to get him trending back upwards. And I think one of those things is establishing the running game. I mean, they put up 59 yards on the ground against Ole Miss. That's just unlike Georgia. They usually have their way with people, and they did not with Ole Miss at all. And I think that then just puts even more pressure on Carson Beck. So to me, you got to really get Trevor Etienne and that ground game going, and you just got to lean into your veteran. I think at this point it's too risky to go to your backup and try to bench your QB1.
Yeah, looking at the rest of their schedule, obviously they have a huge matchup coming up this Saturday. Tennessee comes to town, and it's a night game in benefit of Georgia, and thankfully again it's at home for Georgia. But Tennessee is very dangerous. They're not the Tennessee team now at this point in the season that we thought they were going to be. We thought they were going to be this airing it out, super spread like with Hendon Hooker. They're not that, but what they are is a strong defensive team that runs the ball very well in offense and does enough passing it. So I think Georgia is these problems mounting for them are coming at one of the worst times because this loss against Ole Miss, just like we talked about, it can trickle on, and this could end up being a back-to-back loss scenario, losing to Tennessee. So just like Adam said, I don't think you can turn to Gunnar Stockton, their backup, in a monumental game like this. Now, if we were 2 weeks away and they were about to host Massachusetts, I'd be like, sure, yeah, let's give Gunnar a spin and see how that does. But even ending the season, we just talked about Georgia Tech. Well, Georgia Tech rolls into town for Georgia, and even when Georgia Tech hasn't been as dangerous as they've been the past 2 years, even then, Georgia Tech has given Georgia problems. They call that rivalry clean, old-fashioned hate for a reason. Georgia Tech is not going to be scared of them. And, I mean, that game is kind of becoming more and more dangerous for Georgia as it gets closer. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is really for them to fix things. Just like he said, I don't know if it's you need to lean into the run game more. I don't know if the offensive line is just not as good as we thought they were going to be. But I mean, there's problems, and I mean, we talked about it before even the season started. Is this partly a culture problem that a lot of people have been talking about with Georgia? I mean, you're having all these arrests happening off the field. A lot of people are talking about the players and their focus and whatnot. I mean, I wonder if this is kind of all a culmination of that. I'm not sure, but they got to get it fixed quick.
Yeah, I don't know. This is not even a Georgia football team that I remember talking about at the beginning of the season. I thought they were going to be unstoppable, and this is not just to blame Carson Beck, even though I think he's the main problem. Watching that Ole Miss game, Georgia's defense, they were so inconsistent. Some drives they would absolutely halt Ole Miss, and then other drives they would just let Jackson Dart throw the field on them. I mean, he did have a touchdown interception, but he threw for 199 yards, 200 yards. So even the defense, I think, is inconsistent, and that's something that I don't think I'm used to seeing from Georgia. Usually they have a star-studded defense, and they're always super tight up front. And they could not get to Jackson Dart consistently. I mean, just could not. And as far as Carson Beck, I don't know. I feel like Kirby Smart might be in position where he's like in a Nick Saban position. The championship game a handful of years back. He went from Jalen Hurts. He just wasn't getting it done. He turned to two of the freshmen and two went and won in the game. Carson Beck's his last 6 games: Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Texas, Florida, Ole Miss. 3 interceptions, 0 interceptions, 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions, 3 interceptions, 1 interception. 2 of those games, he had 0 touchdowns. He's thrown 12 interceptions in his last 6 games. It is obviously not just a play calling problem. It is a Carson Beck problem. So I don't know if maybe you need to do like a little, a little dumb down the playbook and do some gimme plays, maybe to start building his confidence back up, throw some quick out routes, swing routes, maybe a couple screens, do something. I do agree that the run game needs to get going. That's the whole reason why Etienne left Florida to come to Georgia. It was better for him, and Etienne is a solid runner. Yes. But Carson Beck is not only not playing well, but when you watch him throw the football, his decision-making is atrocious. I mean, he is just not making good throws. He's holding on to the football way too long. And when he tries to get rid of it, he's throwing the double and triple coverage consistently. So I don't know. If they go into this game against Tennessee and they're down at halftime, I wouldn't put it past them. That they go to the second string, because in that position, if you lose to Tennessee, you're done. Your season's over. So I think as far as going down to the second string, I think it comes to this week. If Carson Beck plays like he's been playing, I would say Kirby Smart probably makes a change sometime during that game.
I was about to say, you got to think about it too, like you were saying. I wonder if Carson Beck is having a hard time adjusting to not having a Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers that can easily bail him out, because those are 2 great receivers. It felt like no matter where you threw it, they were going to catch it. And, now he has fresh receivers that maybe he doesn't have enough rapport with, or, I don't know if there's some miscommunication. Like you said, Dillon, do they need to kind of go back to the basics to get some things figured out? But yeah, to your point, they can't drop this one or it's all over for them. Any hopes they had of, if they even though win the SEC, getting into one of those, later spots, so this is a monumental matchup coming for Kirby Smart and this Georgia Bulldogs team.
Oh yeah.
I was about to say, you keep jumping over one of the other upsets you had. Surprisingly, Kansas taking out Iowa State.
Yeah.
After Iowa State, we were thinking they were going to bounce back after losing the previous week, and here comes Kansas winning 45-36. I mean, we kind of talked about it last week. Is Kansas is just a handful of plays away from their record being totally different than what it is. And, you had, another situation where, Rocco Beck for Iowa State plays great. 383 yards, 3 touchdowns. He has 1 turnover. But, Kansas comes in and, gets it done. And, it just continues to add to the craziness that's been this football season. On top of playing at Arrowhead as well.
Yeah. Yeah, except for throwing a little bit of a wrench in the Big 12 race and making it a little bit somewhat interesting, if you will. Yeah, I mean, Iowa State was up to, 11? 10 in the AP poll just about 4 weeks ago.
I think even 9.
Yeah,
Maybe even 9. Because I remember at one point there was debate with them in Clemson why Iowa State jumped Clemson. I think it was during the bye week or something like that, supposedly. But
Yep.
Kansas definitely making a little shake up there and starting to kind of, I think, weed out some of those, if you want to call them pretenders or contenders there in that Big 12 race.
It seems like we're talking about Kansas more and more often of being kind of giant killers. And I know, well, even Kansas before the season started was a team that a lot of people thought was going to challenge the Big 12 title with Jalen Daniels coming back. People thought that, they had a lot of more tools at their disposal to do more than what they've really shown so far. So even when you're looking at their overall record, 3-6, 2-4 in conference, it's one of those things that they have weapons that are honestly better than their record. And maybe Iowa State didn't realize that, or maybe didn't realize it, but didn't prepare themselves as well as they probably should have and needed to for the Kansas Jayhawks. But yeah, Iowa State, I mean, they're usually a really well-coached team. So that's kind of, I think it makes it more stunning of how and why the loss happened. But I mean, they're still sitting at 3 in the Big 12 conference standings. But then again, you have, let's see, how many teams are 4-2? 4 in the conference.
Yeah.
So I mean, just to even say that you're sitting up there near the pack, near the top, isn't that much of a brag. You could say the same thing with the SEC with all the teams that have 2 losses and stuff like that. So it just like we talked about, like, in all these conferences, there's a lot more wide open races happening, but it also means there's less chances for errors for a lot of these teams. So whenever you have these games that you start dropping, maybe they're an anomaly or a blip on the radar, it's harder to recover, and we'll have to see if they're able to recover.
Yeah, I thought Kansas. I think it might be an inconsistency here, but I think Kansas is, again, like you guys said, I think they're a better football team than what their record shows.
Yep.
No doubt about it. I thought they did a really good job of controlling the ball. They had the ball for, I think, 11 more minutes total than what Iowa State had. They had the ball for over 35 minutes. And then I thought their D-line did a really good job, too. They held the Iowa State to 78 total rushing yards, while when you flip it over, Kansas had 3 different people, 2 running backs and Daniels. They all had 12 carries or more, and they ran for about 237 yards in Iowa State. So I thought they did really well. Now, Kansas's secondary got tore up pretty good by Iowa State's quarterback. He threw for about 383 on them. But I thought their defense did really well. They were able to basically make Iowa State one-dimensional, basically throw the ball if you want to beat us. And Iowa State it wasn't enough for them. So I thought Kansas did a really good job on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, unfortunately for Iowa State, they're going to have to face another Kansas team at the end of the year, too, with Kansas State. So the PTSD for them may set in later for playing another Kansas team.
Yeah, especially when you look at Big 12, because you've got BYU sitting up there undefeated, and then behind them, it looks like right now, if you were to end the season today, you'd have them playing Colorado for the Big 12 championship game.
Wow.
Which would be insane. I mean, Dillon and I, even on the show, at the beginning of the year, we were talking about the Big 12 and the race and what it could be. And boy, were we wrong, because we were thinking, it makes the most sense to, say, in our case, well, it looks like Oklahoma State should have the best chance, to win that conference, because you got to think the experienced offensive line, the experienced quarterback,
Ollie Gordon, who just
Ollie Gordon. I mean, who would have thought that
yards?
All of those wouldn't have mattered. And you have BYU year 2 into the Big 12, sitting at the top.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then Utah, unfortunately, taking a nosedive with Cam Rising getting injured.
Yeah.
Again. Probably applying for his 12th year in college coming up. I mean, those are the 2 I heard the most talked about as contenders for the Big 12 title, and they are the 2 teams at the very bottom. Just what do we know going into a season, especially in the Big 12? I mean, again, everyone talked about it before the season started. This was the most wide open looking conference, just from perspective and paper standpoint. And boy, has it lived up to the hype as far as that goes.
Yeah, 100%. You jump over to another must-win game. You had Alabama headed to Baton Rouge this weekend to take on LSU, and I didn't expect the game that we got. I expected it to be, probably a low-scoring, all-out slugfest between these two teams. And man, it was the Jalen Milroe show, 100% in Death Valley. Dylan's already shaking his head over there with his hate for Alabama.
Oh, God.
Jalen Milroe comes into this game, only passes for 109 yards, rushes for 185 and 4 touchdowns. Like, who needs to throw the ball anymore? Jalen Milroe said, all right, guys, I got us. I'm going to carry us, for the win here because Jim Miller not getting it done at 13 carries for only 38 yards, 2.9 yards carry, not getting it done. And again, this was a must-win for Alabama because they're one of those 2 lost teams sitting right there. Well, if they lose this one, it's no chance there. And they find a way. LSU drops to 6-3, 3-2 in conference, and it's going to be an interesting finish to the SEC. But I have a hard time seeing, even though it's not Nick Saban, this Alabama team find a third loss. I mean, it still could happen, but I think DeBoer understands the pressure that comes with that coaching job, and more than 2 losses, I feel like for them is unacceptable.
I would even say for them 2 losses is unacceptable. With the way they're used to handling business. But I agree with you. I have a tough time finding a third loss. They play Mercer this week, which. We're big guys on the SoCon, and I will tell you right now, that Mercer team is not going to roll over and just let their teeth get kicked in by Alabama. They're going to show up in Tuscaloosa and give a fight. I mean, they're like number 1, number 2 in the FCS in multiple defensive categories. And they're only, I think, 9-1? Is that right, Harrison? 9-1? I think they are 8-1.
I think it's 8-1, but yeah, they're studs.
They're going to give Alabama some trouble. And just like I told them on our show earlier, they're going to probably give them trouble for about a quarter or half, and Alabama's going to Alabama and run away with it. But the Oklahoma game that got announced earlier is a night game where Alabama travels to Norman. I think Alabama takes care of business there. And then also they got Auburn coming to town for the Iron Bowl. Auburn just looks horrible. So I don't think there's really any threat there for the
this is one of those games, though. It's a rivalry game, and you never know what you can get with the Iron Bowl. So
you're right.
As Auburn could be, they don't need to overlook them because that could turn bad really fast.
Right. Yeah. If it was a Jordan Hare, I would say something probably a little different because they've always had some bad mojo in Jordan Hare, i.e. the last decade specifically too. But this Alabama team we talked about a little bit. Obviously, a interesting start to the year and shoes that DeBoer had to fill that I do not envy in the slightest bit with the pressure he felt having to take over after Nick Saban. But I told Harrison this online and offline. I got a feeling this Alabama team is going to make a run this month, and I think they're going to end up squeezing into the playoffs. Whatever happens from there happens from there. But this Bama team is someone that right now I quite frankly would not want to face.
Don't say that.
Ohio State, Dillon, why don't you enlighten us here with your thoughts?
Don't say that, dude. LSU. I mean, you just had to do one job, right? You just had to stop Milroe. That's all you had to do because I don't think really any other part of Alabama is like crushing, right? Jalen Milroe is the guy who just he's either really good or he's mediocre. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if you get this Jalen Milroe, like the one who played against Georgia, which is this exact guy who showed up against LSU, the guy who runs for 3 touchdowns and 185 yards on the ground, like they would be so good. And I'm glad he's not that consistent. But I mean, I thought this was going to be close. I picked Alabama to win. I thought it was going to be close.
Yeah.
Jalen Milroe obviously had different ideas. I mean, he just made everything look so easy this game. I mean, he couldn't throw the ball if you put any receiver in front of him. He could not throw the ball at all this game. But his feet on the ground, he is so fast.
Yeah.
It is absolutely atrocious. I mean, it's crazy. And he was actually one of my Heisman picks. I had him in the top 5 with one of my Heisman picks. And he started the season really good. I think in the first 3 games, he had like 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He was looking good. Obviously, he kind of fell off a little bit. But I hate that LSU got blown out like this because Alabama's going to make their way into the playoffs again. And I'll tell you what, I hate more than Alabama football. I hate Alabama playoff football because they're so hard to beat in the playoffs every time, and it's ridiculous. And it makes me mad. This is a different team. I think they could probably lose in the playoffs, especially with there being 12 instead of just 4 people. But they make their way in there. They're going to be a tough team to beat. I don't care what anybody says. They're going to be super hard to beat, and that makes me so mad.
It is a different. You have to think about it. It's not a Nick Saban Alabama team anymore. And I mean, me and Adam have talked about this on and offline that I think a lot of this up and down that Alabama's had this season has been a part of not having the same discipline and focus that Nick Saban would light into these players during half times, practices, things like that. And definitely if Alabama under Nick Saban was in any playoff scenario or just any non-regular season game, I'll just say any game period, I would hate to play Alabama under Nick Saban. And I think that this game, LSU Death Valley at night does have magic to it. I've talked about it several times on my show, but the one team that's not afraid of that magic is Alabama. And my gosh, were they not? And I think LSU is being exposed, especially after Texas A&M, that their rush defense, especially against a mobile quarterback, is atrocious, absolutely atrocious. And I think Alabama just took the notes from A&M and said, all right, you could not defend a mobile quarterback. Jalen Milroe, we're going to run you until they can't stop it. And that's exactly what they did. Alabama didn't try to pretend to be anything they weren't. And Jalen Milroe ran 4 touchdowns down their throat. And then 2 other people had rushing touchdowns to make it 6, just to prove a point that they can't stop the run. But yeah, LSU, this whole season just seems like a woulda, coulda, shoulda type season for them. They get close to making their moment, and then they lose it. So, but yeah, this Alabama team is picking up speed, though. It's just going to depend, like you said, his consistency throwing the ball, heading down these other close games, especially when if they get into the title game, they get in a playoff race. Can you win in other ways and not be one-dimensional? Will be the challenge for Alabama moving forward.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you're saying this LSU team is the typical Brian Kelly team.
Exactly.
Big game, Brian.
Yeah, and that I was so close to picking LSU before this game happened, and then throughout the week I was thinking about it. I was like, it's LSU at night, but it's also Brian Kelly. And I was like,
Like, do those just cancel each other out there? So
yeah. so then at that point I was like, I'm just gonna go with my gut with Alabama.
Yeah. Before we move on to week 12 here, another game that I wanted to talk about here, just because the fact that it's been just Dillon and I have talked about it each week. Notre Dame just blows out Florida State 52-3 in what has been an abysmal season for this Florida State team. And then you see this week they announce Mike Norvell fires the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and the wide receivers coach. It's probably one of those changes where it's like, hey, I got to make some changes or it's going to be my job. And, we see that happening. But it's just a crazy turn of events to add to this crazy season that you have a Florida team that looked so good last year come out and just, from week 1, look just absolutely terrible. And, we mentioned, well, maybe a quarterback change can fix some things, get DJU out because, he's just not good. And, even a quarterback change does not help this team. So, I don't know. I mean, where do you go from now if you're Florida State, where you have a great season last year and feel like you get snubbed, and then, you come out and put this together this year?
Can't go anywhere but up. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you've literally hit rock bottom. I've never seen a team, right? I've never seen a team punt the ball 7 times, throw 2 interceptions, have time of possession more than Notre Dame. They held the ball for over 33 minutes, and they had 88 passing yards and 120 rushing yards total. So I don't know how you control the ball. I don't know how you control the ball most of the game, and you're barely over 200 yards. They averaged 3 yards a play. I mean, this might be one of the greatest downfalls of a team that goes 13-0, and then the next year I don't even know what this is, but it's not even a football team. I have no idea what Florida State is, but it's not football. They're just doing everything they can to try to string up something to try to just make any game competitive, and everything they're doing is just not working.
Yeah, they're discombobulated on every front possible. I mean, you're right. There's going to be a Netflix documentary one day discussing the downfall of Florida State football, and include the narrative about the meltdown of their fan base when they got snubbed last year from the playoffs. And
that's where it started.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, and DJU obviously was kind of a glaring issue at the beginning, and I kind of hate it for him, because he really is a good dude. He's really wholesome, very sportsmanlike and classy in everything that he does. And it kind of does suck to see his career, the path that it has taken. When he had a great start at Clemson his freshman year, and then it was all downhill from there. He goes to Oregon State, kind of does okay, and then comes to Florida State, and it's just a train wreck in itself. And, one thing I think for Florida State, I don't know if you would call it a culture issue. I mean, I guess you could, but to me, I think Mike Norvell relies entirely too much on the transfer portal. I'm not one of those anti-portal guys. I think you have to strike a good balance with your high school recruits and the portal. But I think Norvell has went all in on the portal, and, it worked out well for him last year. Don't get me wrong. But now he's seeing the downsides of it not working out well for you. And you got no one meshing, not great chemistry. And I think we all saw that starting with the Orange Bowl last year. What did all the portal guys do? They jumped onto them in the playoffs. And that was in my opinion, that's kind of a good example of foreshadowing what this season was going to look like. So there's no way to describe Florida State than just discombobulated on all fronts.
Yeah, I think you said it all. And there's a lot that can be said about this Florida State team, and nothing's good. None of it's good. The only possible good thing, I guess, if you're a Florida State fan, like where do you even go from here, is the fact that if you're Mike Norvell and you are able to hold on to your job for next year, it should be a very appealing job for coordinators, for offense and defense. And I say that because you cannot do any worse. There's no way you're going to do worse. And you were going to be able to sell playing time to any recruit, high school or transfer in the nation. And it's going to be so easy to bring in players if they just want to say, I want to be the one to turn it around. But as a coordinator, I mean, you're going to have no pressure when you go in because, again, you can't do any worse than what we've seen this year. The downside is going to be what you're going to be starting with. And already we're seeing, because I follow recruiting very closely, and Florida State is just plummeting in team recruitings. I think the last I saw, they were down to 43 or 46 in the nation. And Florida State standards, that's built to out-recruit anyone in Florida, is just abysmal. So that's going to be the biggest problem. Again, you're going to have to lean heavily into the transfer portal. You're going to have to get coordinators that are able to develop and scheme. So it's going to be a task to go ahead of them. But Mark Norvell, the coordinator hires, if he keeps his head coaching job, are going to be massive heading into next season. Or else you're going to look at another back-to-back season of just your program's dead in the water. So, and it's incredible to be saying this about a team like Florida State that, should have the NIL infrastructure to compete and outbid other schools, and has the history that they do. And something that I've already heard about people clamoring for is Deion Sanders to come from Colorado to take the head coaching job at Florida State if Mike Norvell doesn't get it done. Because, say what you will about the way he's done it at Colorado, I don't agree with everything he's done, but he's gotten results in year two. And the fact that he's an alumni, he'll be able to recruit to any household in that Florida region. So that's just something I've already heard as rumors. I think right now it's just rumors, but that's just something to keep your ear out for.
Let me ask you guys this, because I know he's choosing that down to choosing between them two. Do you think this season would have been any different for Florida State? Say Cam Ward chooses to go to Florida State instead of Miami.
Yeah. Cam Ward is he definitely, I mean, they're not, I'm not saying that maybe they wouldn't be bad, because obviously a quarterback doesn't make your whole team, but I mean, they're not 1-9 bad.
No.
I mean, Cam Ward's thrown for like over 3,000 yards and 28, 29 touchdowns, whatever. I mean, that kid's a stud. But I don't know if I'd say they're awesome, but
yeah,
they're not this bad. We're not talking about a complete and utter just burning of a program down to the ground.
Yeah,
that's what this is.
Oh yeah.
I would put them as like an 8-4 team probably. Had Cam Ward would have gone there. I mean, they would have had some great wins, but probably also some bad losses, just like you saw with Miami, Georgia Tech. I think you've seen kind of the fair share of that with Florida State if Cam Ward hadn't gone there. But you're correct, Dillon. The quarterback doesn't make the whole team, or does it break the whole team? But I don't know if Cam Ward could have fixed the whole discombobulated train wreck that is what's going on in Tallahassee.
No, and I think it just speaks to just how badly the first few games DJU was. I mean, I saw it from just the Georgia Tech game. I was like, this guy can't hit the broadside of a barn. And then he tries to scramble, and I was like, he's running in sand. I was like, it was just so hard to watch.
Couldn't throw, and it was like watching like Big Ben like try to run, like try to scramble. And that's really what it was, like slow motion.
Yeah.
And like, he got like $1 million in NIL, like, NIL endorsements to come play there. So like, the kid got paid to do nothing basically, and is like 100th year of college football.
Yeah, what a job.
Oh yeah. So I mean, that's just continues to add to the insanity of this college football season. We'll jump over to week 12, and Dillon and I like to go through and talk about some of the games and the ESPN pick'em. We've been going through this, and Dillon and I haven't done so hot this year. And I think it goes to explain the craziness of this year, and how it's not cut and dry. Anybody can win any given week, especially this year, and it's crazy, and we'll just go ahead and jump right in here. First matchup on the docket here, you've got Tulane headed to Navy to take on the 7-2 Navy midshipmen. Tulane is favored by 6.5 here at the Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium.
It's hard to pick against military academies. It is, because you just don't know. I mean, when they played Notre Dame, I really thought they were going to give them a game, and they just completely shot themselves in the foot and walked into the landmine field on their own. I'd probably have to lean towards Tulane in this one.
I'm looking at the spread here for that game. You got Tulane's favorite -6.5. I think I would take Navy plus 6.5 on this one. I think with the Notre Dame game was a little bit of an anomaly there. I think with the cost of turnovers and just the complete, just absolute fatal miscues they had early on in that game, put them out of it real quick. I think they've learned from that. I think they'll bounce back from that. That was a few weeks ago, but now. But I think with this Tulane team coming into town, give me Navy plus 6.5 on this one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to lean towards Tulane. It is hard picking against those military academies, just because you just don't know what they're going to do, and they can just ruin everything for you. But Tulane's playing really, they're playing really well. Their offense is pretty high powered. I mean, they got a little bit of a dual type of thing going on. I mean, their quarterback, taking care of the ball, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but their running back Hughes, he's got over 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns on the season too. So their offense is playing really well, and I think an offense like Tulane's might just be a little much for Navy to hold down consistently through a whole game. So it's probably I wouldn't say it's a blowout like the Notre Dame game, but I think Tulane probably comes out of this one.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that it comes down to with Navy and some of the inconsistency is which Blake Horvath are you getting? And that's what makes it tough, because you see he is their leading passer and leading rusher, and if you probably give him the opportunity, would somehow find a way to be their leading receiver. He's got over nearly 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 870 yards, and 13 touchdowns on the ground. Typical academy, one of the service academy, schools still running that type of offense where you have the dual threat quarterback. But to me, yeah, that's what it comes down to is the inconsistencies there. And that's why I think I'm going to follow Dillon Harrison there and take Tulane this week in this matchup. We jump over to the Big Ten with Michigan State and Illinois in Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois. Both teams coming off a loss. Michigan State has the bye week after the loss to Indiana. You had Illinois the bye week coming off of that loss against Minnesota. These are two teams that need to get back in the win column. Dillon and I talked about Illinois earlier in the year where they were really looking good. Luke Altmaier, 1,800 yards, nearly 1,900 yards on the season, 16 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, really takes care of the ball. Illinois by 3.5, favored by 3.5 in this one.
These are two bad teams.
Yeah.
They just haven't played well. I should take that back. Michigan State's not a good team. Illinois, I think, is better than what the record shows. They had some tough losses, but the Penn State game, they could have went either way. They made some mistakes. Penn State ran away with them. Oregon, that wasn't even close. Minnesota, that's the typical Illinois team that we're used to seeing. But Michigan State's won. They're 1-4 in their last 5 games. Illinois is 2-3 in their last 5 games. I can't stand picking any team that has the name Michigan in it. And Illinois beat Michigan, so I'm going to take Illinois to win.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take Illinois as well. Under Brett Bielema, I mean, they've looked like a different team ever since he started coaching there, and they play hard, and even in their losses, they haven't, even in like the Oregon one, they weren't out as much as the 38-9 loss, but. Yeah, you said it. Penn State, they had chances in it. Michigan was a good win, but Michigan State, they're still doing the old school football, and it's not getting any results. So I'm definitely going with Illinois there too. Kind of surprised it's not a bigger spread on it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with Dillon and Harrison on this as well. Give me Illinois in this one. I think Aiden Childs, his ability, or I should say lack of there, to protect the football, 11 interceptions and 8 touchdowns. That's not exactly the ratio you want your quarterback to be having. So give me Illinois in this game. Two teams going kind of downward trajectory right now, but give me Illinois to bounce back.
Yeah, it's going to be Illinois across the board here. All the reasons you guys said there, I think Illinois is the team that bounces back. The struggles that Michigan State's at quarterback. I think that all culminates into an Illinois bouncing back and getting a win here. We jump over to the SEC where we're going to talk about another bad Florida team in the state of Florida. This time it being the Gators, where they actually absolutely got demolished last weekend versus Texas. LSU coming off that loss to Alabama. It's at Florida in the swamp. I've personally been to that environment. It can get loud, rowdy. LSU favored by 4 in this one, but when you're on your third string quarterback, we don't know for sure if DJ Lagway is going to be playing for Florida or not. He suited up and dressed out, warmed up last week, kind of made you think, does he try to give it a go? And then you're rolling with Warner, the walk-on transfer from Yale, coming off a torn ACL. I mean, this Florida State team is bad. I mean, Scott Strickland came out and said Billy Napier is going to be here next year. So, no worry for him losing his job, barring any extreme disastrous results here. But, yeah, this is one I think if I had to pick, I think LSU probably bounces back here. Maybe DJ Lagway plays and gives Florida a chance. I mean, they had a chance there against Georgia. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, maybe that's an even closer game than what it was. What do you guys think?
Yeah, go ahead, Harrison.
I was going to say, probably what you're already thinking too. I'm probably going to take LSU as well. I mean, the Florida, I feel so bad for them. They have the worst November schedule I've ever seen of any team, for as brutal as it is. But yeah, without DJ Lagway at the helm, I have a hard time believing they're going to have consistent spark on that offense. And on the flip side, LSU, they've proven that at least their offense can move the ball, especially through the air. And then their running back, Caleb Durham, has been a bright side for them as a freshman. Their biggest thing for LSU is they can't make mistakes, and they can't let Florida just run it down their throat. But especially the fact that DJ Lagway looks to be, if not playing, even if he does, he's probably not 100%. Yeah. So I think it's just you got to go with LSU on it. If this was at home for LSU, it wouldn't even be a thought for me. But I still think that even in the swamp, LSU will pull it out.
Yeah, I'd agree with Harrison on that. I think if Lagway plays, I think I'm pretty inclined to take Florida +4 on this. But I don't think he's going to be in the equation on this one. And if he is, because like you said, Harrison, I don't think he's going to be even really that close to 100% with that big hamstring injury he's got right now. I think LSU is going to bounce back. I think big game Ryan, he'll probably have a couple hiccups and a couple miscues here and there. But this is a Florida team where you can afford to have some miscues and come out on top. So give me LSU on this one. And that means Florida's got one out to get bowl eligibility with Ole Miss coming next week.
Good luck.
Yeah, I think it's going to be LSU across the board. This is not the Urban Meyer type of team that we're used to seeing. I know it's been a while since he's been there, but this is not the same Florida team that we've been used to seeing for the last handful of years now. Some things don't go their way, which is unfortunate. A lot of close games, but they are very good at being inconsistent. They win a close one at UCF, then they go to overtime against Tennessee, play really good against them. That's a tough loss. Then they beat Kentucky, who's not the worst team, I feel like. And then they go to Georgia, even though I don't think Georgia's as good as we think they are. They were in it for most of the time until Lagway got hurt, and then they just get destroyed by Texas. LSU, they got good wins, man. Arkansas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M and Alabama. They found out the hard way that they're not very good at protecting or trying to protect against the mobile quarterback. I just don't see them losing to a Florida team that has a lot of injuries and is just super inconsistent. And I don't think, no offense to him, is very well coached. I'm going to take LSU to win here.
Yeah, looking at it, the latest update we have on DJ Lagway is that he was expected to practice this afternoon after a quote-unquote promising Monday morning workout session, though he is still recovering from that grade 2 hamstring sprain. So, yeah, like you guys said, even if he does go, he's not going to be 100%. So at that point, why risk getting the potential future of your program injured even more?
Right.
Yeah.
We bounce back to another matchup with a service academy. You have Oregon State taking on Air Force at Falcon Stadium in Colorado. Oregon State favored by 4.5 here. McCoy for Oregon State, 1,300 yards, 3 touchdowns on the season, 6 interceptions. Hankerson, 870 on the ground and 14 touchdowns. Oregon State relying heavy on that run game. Thoughts here?
This is like a toilet bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, their quarterbacks combined have 4 touchdowns and 11 interceptions combined on the season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just I don't even know. It seems like Oregon State they've had some better luck in the games. I mean, Air Force being 2-7, Oregon State being 4-5. It's hard to pick Oregon State coming off 4 straight losses, and before this last week, Air Force had 4 in a row. So I'm probably going to go with Oregon State here. It's it seems like they have a little more success. It's hard to believe in a team that's 2-7, so I'll take Oregon State.
I'll probably do the same. It's just I think Air Force has just struggled to score for most of the year, and Oregon State at least has more chances of being able to put the ball in the end zone. And I don't know. Yeah, I just think they would have more depth than a Service Academy team that's already playing handicapped with the personnel that you have to have there at those schools. And they're already 2-7, so it's not like Army that is handicapped, but is just it's got some studs that won't back down and are getting gutty wins over there at Army. So yeah, it's not Army, so I'm going to pick Oregon State.
Yeah, give me Oregon State as well. I think the lack of offensive production by Air Force is going to have them have another shortcoming again this week and fall to 2-8. And so give me Oregon State.
Yeah, I agree there. Oregon State across the board here. We'll jump over to the Big 12. You have Baylor headed to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia, quote-unquote, Fighting Pat McAfees here. Baylor favored by 1.5 in this game on the road. Robertson, 1,700 yards on the season, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Green for West Virginia, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. These are two just like we talked about a while ago when we were talking about the Big 12. Some of those middle of the pack teams that, there's no really clear cut above BYU, maybe a Colorado, but then you look down the rest of the way and you've got all these teams, smushed together. You've got West Virginia 4-2, Baylor's 3-3. You've got the Oklahoma States and the TCUs as well, but
I think I'm gonna go with the Fighting Pat McAfees on this one. I'm gonna be a little bold, as bold as I can be, even though it still feels like a coin toss of a game. The fact that West Virginia, it's a home game for them. I am a believer in home field advantage. Both teams are coming off back-to-back wins. Baylor has 3 wins in a row, but I think I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb and pick West Virginia to bring it home.
I'm gonna go against the grain on this one and go with Baylor on this one. They've been having some really good offensive production here the last few weeks. Obviously, a big win, kind of a little bit of a come from behind win against TCU last weekend. Give me Baylor to go up into Morgantown and quiet down Country Roads a little bit.
Yeah, I'm also going to have to go with Baylor here. Every time I pick West Virginia, they've literally lost. Every time I pick them to win, they've literally lost. But Baylor's been playing well. Like Adam said, they've had some really good offensive production. And even their 2 losses against their last 2 previous losses against Iowa State and BYU, I mean, they put up a fight for most of those games. I mean, losing to BYU 34-28. That was a close game. ISU 43-21. They were in it for most of that game. And then I think is a good win against Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. That we won't go over that. And then TCU, with comeback win there. So I think they've been playing well enough. I think the only thing that could deter it would be, like Harrison said, having home field advantage in a situation like this could be huge. But I'm still going to take Baylor for the win.
Yeah, we're going to split it down the middle right here. I'm going to follow suit with Harrison and go home field advantage. I think West Virginia gets it done here. And it's going to be interesting to see because, these are 2 teams that it's not going to be a fun game to watch, I don't think. But, we'll see what happens here. We'll see if Country Roads gets the win here and they can quiet down that Baylor squad. We'll jump over to some Sunbelt action. We haven't had too many of these through this pick'em so far. You've got James Madison playing Old Dominion in Norfolk, Virginia at SB Ballard Stadium. James Madison and the Dukes 7-2, their first season without Kirk Cignetti that has went to Indiana. Old Dominion 4-5. James Madison favored by 3.5 in this one. Barnett, 2,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for James Madison. Really taking care of the ball. Petway, 664 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. Joseph for Old Dominion, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. This one is, one of those games where James Madison's came up the ranks, got moved up to the next division of college football, and are still having success here in the Sun Belt. So I'm going to go ahead and say give me the Dukes in this one.
Yeah, I'm also going to have to agree.
Yeah, I'm gonna go James Madison as well, all the way. South Carolina, we played and I saw up close Old Dominion. Old Dominion is a good team. Don't get me wrong. They run a very like high flying spread offense, and they had some coaches that came over from Tennessee that was there during the Hendon Hooker explosion of offense with Josh Heupel. But I'm also a firm believer in looking at how a team wins and whatnot, and James Madison destroyed Georgia State 38-7. I know it was a few games back, but Old Dominion also played Georgia State and only kind of squeaked by 21-14. So yeah, I mean James Madison, they're a winning machine, and even my father, he said he drove by their campus, I think it was a year or two ago, and he said it just looks like a Power Five school up there. I mean, they just have it rolling with James Madison. So yeah, give me the Dukes.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go with the Dukes as well. Looking at common opponents between James Madison and Old Dominion, you mentioned Georgia State there, Harrison. Well, I look at Georgia Southern. James Madison lost to Georgia Southern 28-14 just 3 weeks ago, whereas Old Dominion beat Georgia Southern a couple weeks ago 47-19. So I don't know if that's an anomaly or if that's maybe a trend upwards for Old Dominion by chance. But I think we got a little bit of a tie. James Madison somewhat. We had a coach at the Citadel while we were there, Mike Houston, who was phenomenal and took the Citadel to the playoffs back-to-back years. SoCon titles 2015, 2016, who ended up taking that job, James Madison, right after the Citadel, and did a phenomenal job up there. So give me the Dukes.
Yeah, Dukes across the board here. We'll stay in the Sun Belt with this next matchup. You have Arkansas State and Georgia State in Atlanta. Georgia State favored by 1 in this game. Rayner for Arkansas State, 2,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Velo for Georgia State, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Both these guys not necessarily taking care of the ball a ton. Both teams coming off a loss. Georgia State coming off a loss to James Madison that we just talked about. Arkansas State coming off a loss to Louisiana Monroe, the Raging Cajuns. This is another one of those interesting matchups where we don't get Sun Belt matchups often around here for our pick'ems, and they doubled up on them this week.
I'd probably have to go to Arkansas State. I would honestly even brag about the fact that one of my college football dynasties is Arkansas State, and they're doing pretty well. So be that as it will. Georgia State has lost 5 in a row, and that does a huge load on your psyche and your confidence. On the flip side, Arkansas State up and down. The last outing they lost pretty badly, 55-19 to Louisiana. But yeah, give me Arkansas State. I think it is interesting though that the ESPN analytics has Georgia State winning by 64% in this. So don't know what ESPN analytics is looking at here, but they have them winning.
Yeah, I'm also going to take Arkansas State. I don't know what they're looking at. You lose to Old Dominion, Marshall, Appalachian State, Connecticut, and then JMU. You lost to Connecticut.
Yeah.
I can't. There's no way I could pick a team that lost back-to-back games to Connecticut, Appalachian State. That's just I don't see how you could. 64%. Okay, I'll take Arkansas State. They're having a hard time. Georgia State 5 in a row. Like Harrison said, dude, that does so much on your mental when you're playing football and you're just trying to win and you can't. No matter what you do, you can't figure out anything to do correctly. So because of that, I am going to take Arkansas State.
I think the only reason ESPN is given that sort of percentage is because they're looking back at the Georgia State win over Vanderbilt back in September, which is it feels like a decade ago at this point in time. That's the only reason why only rationale that I can see with that. But I agree. You made a great point there, Dillon and Harrison, both on the mental status that you're just getting your butt beat week in and week out. And I'm probably using that maybe a little aggressively because they're not getting blown out per se, really. I mean, their loss was a 31-point loss But when you continuously keep coming up short, it's definitely taxing emotionally and mentally. So give me Arkansas State to go to Atlanta and win this game. Might be a little bit more interesting than we think, but they'll come away with a victory.
Yeah, Arkansas State sweeps here. I'm going with them as well to get the win over Georgia State. We jump over to Rutgers headed to SCCU Stadium in College Park, Maryland to take on the Maryland Terps. Maryland favored by 3.5 in this game at home. Maryland coming off that loss against Oregon. Rutgers coming off that win against Minnesota. This is another interesting one to pick here. You have two teams that, you back before their game against Nebraska, you thought this Rutgers team might be looking pretty good this year. And then, since then, up until Minnesota, 4 straight losses. And, kind of the same story there for Maryland. They've got four losses there, sandwiching a win against USC.
I hate Maryland. So I don't think I can let myself pick Maryland. I'm gonna go with Rutgers, and also just the fact that hopefully them coming off of a win against Minnesota will get them in the right mindset, especially to go on the road and play Maryland. But yeah, these are two teams at the bottom of the conference that it seems like they take a step forward and then they take a step back. But yeah, I hate Maryland. I do not like Mike Locksley. He talks a lot of smack against South Carolina people on Twitter and in recruiting. And yeah, I can't stand that dude.
Yeah, I think I probably will go to Rutgers on this one as well. Just look kind of at the common opponents here. Maryland lost to Minnesota, it said 48-23. Rutgers just beat Minnesota last week 26-19. Nothing crazy there, obviously, but I think this Maryland team, it's interesting. They seem to have up and down games where they kind of look impressive, some flashes, and then some moments where it's like, what's going on? So I think that inconsistency really kind of bothers me a little bit with picking them, so give me Rutgers.
Yeah, I think I'm also to take Rutgers. They started off the season pretty hot, and they had a decent win against Washington before they started the losing streak. I don't think Washington's that bad of a team. I just don't think they really figured themselves out. Mm-mm. And then they then a win against Minnesota, who also I don't think is the worst football team. But I think Rutgers overall, I think they're just more a hard nosed, kind of like in the trenches football team. And I think over 4 quarters, I think they probably are willing to win more than Maryland. So
yeah, I'm going to complete this here. I believe I'm saying it right. Give me Rutgers and Calicamanus to get the win here. Not sure on the accurate pronunciation of that name, but Rutgers gets the job done on the road here. We jump over to probably the biggest matchup of the week. Tennessee headed to Athens in what's a must. We talked about this earlier. A must-win game for Georgia. If Tennessee wins this one, they're sitting there with just one SEC loss on the season. Georgia's 8.5-point favorite in this game. I checked earlier. It looks like Tennessee. They're expecting Nico to be good to go for this game. They said he, looked fine at practice today after that injury scare last week that kind of took him out the rest of the game. Who knows what we're going to see from Carson Beck and this Georgia team? Do they bounce back and, when everybody's questioning them, have a game like they came in there and just destroyed Texas, that defense really steps up? Or, do we see them come out and have a bad performance like they did against Ole Miss?
Yeah, this is honestly a tough one to call because, we talked about it earlier, all the problems that Carson Beck is having with Georgia. He's becoming a liability, honestly, for them. But you look back, and as bad as he has played in the last several games, I know Ole Miss they lost, Georgia has still found a way to win in all those other games, even despite the interceptions, the fumbles. Kirby Smart is still a very good coach. He still has the Nick Saban DNA in him. We have seen what a pissed off Georgia team looks like when they played. They went up and played Texas. But I'm going to pick Tennessee. I say that because I just think that Tennessee is playing with a little bit more physicality maybe than Georgia has consistently. And I mean, I definitely could be wrong. I could absolutely see Kirby Smart getting that team ticked off, fired up, and they come out and just destroy them. This is a night game in Georgia. They're going to pull out all the stops. They're probably going to have a lot of big recruits on hand. They're going to want to play well. But Tennessee, give me the Vols to pull off the upset. I think it's -10 pick for Georgia, but I'm going to roll with Tennessee being a good defensive team and a very good running team. Dylan Sampson, their running back, is honestly one of the best running backs in the SEC, and no one's really talking about him.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to take Tennessee. There's only one consistent thing that I see on Georgia right now, and that's Carson Beck making mistakes, numerous mistakes every game. And let me tell you, in SEC football, and I'm sure you guys can all agree, that's something you can't do. I mean, look what just happened to Ole Miss. You know, he made numerous mistakes. They lose the football game. SEC football is unforgiving, and these guys, in my opinion, are better than Ole Miss. Tennessee is. Lama Leva, I think, is a good QB. Sampson, obviously, is one of the best running backs. Their defense is super solid. I just don't think Georgia's defense, if they play well, I just don't think that's going to be enough to overcome Tennessee, especially with them being good in the passing and the run game. And Carson Beck is not just going to stop making mistakes all of a sudden. He's just not going to be like, I'm fixed. That's not going to happen. So I think the mistakes that he makes in this game is probably going to cause him the football game. So I'm going to take Tennessee to win a close game here, but I think mistakes, turnovers is probably going to be the reason why Georgia loses.
Those are good picks, and this pains me to do this, but I'm gonna go against the grain. I hate Georgia straight up, I do, but I have a tough time seeing Georgia come off a loss to Ole Miss, play at home under the lights in Athens, hosting Tennessee, knowing what's on the line, and with it being Kirby Smart, who is pretty much spitting straight out from Nick Saban. I think Georgia wins this game. I think it's a close one. I think there's miscues on both sides. I think you're right, Dylan. I don't think Carson Beck plays really that much better than what he has been, but I think that Georgia does enough to get the win. So if it was a pick against the spread, if it was me building my parlay today, I would take Tennessee. You know, I'm looking at ESPN or Georgia's favorite -10. I would take Tennessee +10 on that. But I think Georgia's going to gut this one out somehow, some way. I just don't see them losing back-to-back weeks, knowing especially what's on the line under Kirby Smart's regime.
Yeah, I see the points from both sides here, and this is it's like all of you said. This is a tough one to pick. I mean, you look at it, and I think I'm going to fall in line with Adam here. I have a tough time seeing Georgia lose at home after a loss. You know, they're going to want to come back. Especially knowing with what's on the line, of you get that third loss, you can kiss any hopes of the playoffs goodbye, unless some weird scenario got you the SEC championship game and you figured out a way to get the win there. But Kirby Smart, you know, is still from that Saban tree. He knows how to get his team fired up. Sure, Carson Beck doesn't play the greatest game, but you know, I think Georgia finds a way to get it done here at home at Athens in a big time SEC matchup.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. I'm excited.
And then to round things out, you have the Kansas Jayhawks headed to Provo, Utah to take on the undefeated BYU Cougars in the Big 12. BYU favored by just 2.5 in this one after they're coming off a super, super close game against Utah, 22-21, where it was an interesting call late in that game. Where BYU kind of gets bailed out a little bit there. If you go back and watch the replay, you know, Utah gets the sack on 4th down at the 1, but wait a minute, there's a defensive holding penalty on Utah, giving BYU the first down, which subsequently lets them get a field goal range to get the game-winning field goal. Utah's athletic director fined $40,000 for his criticisms after the game. I mean, for me, even though Kansas is coming off that big win against Iowa State, I think BYU continues to cook here and you know, stays undefeated, and especially in the Big 12. I
just don't see how anyone goes into BYU at night like on the road and thinks that, yeah, we're going to win this game. Like that is one of the, even just scheduling BYU period, I feel like it has to be one of the dumbest things you could do.
We know from experience.
Yeah, especially traveling there. Like I just do not see Kansas pulling this off. I am shocked that it's only a -3 for BYU. I really am. But I mean, I guess that goes to show that BYU, and I think that the fact that they barely beat Utah, I think it's going to be a wake up call for BYU because they know that they easily could have lost that game, and had them. Utah had them dead to rights. So I definitely think BYU is gonna come back and show more of who they are in this game. Personally, so yeah, give me BYU.
Yeah, I'm gonna take BYU too, but like you said, I'm gonna take BYU, but I'm not gonna say it convincingly. I know it's a tough place to be. They're cooking, they're on fire, they're a way better team than what anybody thought they were gonna be. They're good offensively, they're really good defensively, but Kansas is a better team than what the record shows. And if Daniels can get his mobility moving, I think he can cause some problems for BYU. And I know that game was close and Utah had BYU dead to rights. But if Cam Rising is healthy and plays, it might not have been a close game. It really might not have. You know, they struggled against Oklahoma State. They won by 3 points, almost lost to Oklahoma State, who's not a very good football team. It was a one-score game against Baylor. They beat Arizona. They beat UCF barely by a touchdown. So it's not like BYU is coming in here and they're just blowing all these teams out. But they are playing really solid, and it's just hard to pick against somebody who's 9-0, and they're rolling constantly. But I'll pick BYU, but it would not surprise me if Kansas comes in here towards the end of the season and gets an upset.
And that's kind of where the side I'm on. I think this Kansas team, I think Jalen Daniels is going to wreak havoc. I think on this BYU defense, he's going to make some big plays with his feet. It's going to be a close game, no doubt. That's something I think Kansas has been used to so far this season. You look at their last 5 games, they're all within 1-2 possessions at most, with the exception of their victory against Houston where they blew them out 42-14. And BYU's been used to being in close games this season as well. But I think Kansas, coming off the big win against Iowa State at home last week, give me the Jayhawks, I think, to really, again, just like we said earlier in the show, there's going to be a lot of chaos this month. I think they ensue more chaos as they got nothing to lose. They're 3-6, going to a 9-0 BYU team. All the cards on the table for them. They don't care at this point. So give me Kansas to pull off a massive upset in a very, very close game in BYU.
Yeah, so interesting picks there. You know, that was the last game on our pick 'em. Before we do get out of here, is there any other games you guys want to talk about that's going to be going on, you know, week 12 college football that might need to garner some attention?
South Carolina, hopefully and better smack Missouri in the face and put their foot on their throat is all I got to say.
I was about to say, Dillon can attest to that. You know, I've said it all season. I think Missouri's overrated. They do not look good. They got lucky that they got a win last week on a scoop and score with 30 seconds remaining in the game. You know, yeah, they're 7-2, but, you know, they nearly lose to Vanderbilt. You know, they go and get just smacked by Texas A&M. They get beat by Alabama.
They didn't even score a point against Alabama, did they?
Yeah, no, not a single point.
Jalen Milroe walked in there, and it was like it was like playing like a flag football team. Yeah, like, I mean, I didn't even feel. I don't know if you guys watched it, but I feel like it looked like Alabama was truly trying 100%. Yeah. I mean, they were like having fun playing football. Yeah. I take back. I always gave Caleb crap like at the beginning of the year because every time he said Mizzou's not that good, and then they'd win, and then they'd win, and then they keep winning. So every week I would ask him like, "Are they still not that good? Are they still not that good?" And he stuck by it, but they're really not that good. They're really not that good.
No.
They have a lot of issues, and they should be a decent team. I really feel like they probably should be a decent team. They're just Brady Cook. As much as Mizzou people just love him to death, he is just absolutely awful. He is just not very good. But yeah, I would hope South Carolina goes in there and just beats him to death.
I hope so. I'll be so happy.
I was about to say it's a home game for South Carolina and Williams-Brice. So
Yeah, it is. I have to say, talking to Adam, probably the other game that we have a close eye on is Clemson going to Pitt, and this is going to be a very close game. I feel monster game for Clemson. It's a must-win mode for them. And Adam, do you want to talk about that one real quick?
Yeah. Clemson, the spread on this -10 to me is mind-boggling, to be completely honest. Even as a Clemson fan, I don't know where they got that from. Clemson has had this persona here recently where they have slow starts, kind of like what Georgia has been experiencing this season as well. I'm telling you right now, you go up to Pitt and you have a slow start with a target on your back like Clemson does, it's going to come back to bite you. And it did a few years ago when we went to Pitt in 2021 with DJU as the helm, and they took a big fat L that week as well. This is a week where Clemson has to win out, obviously, to maintain any sort of hope for an ACC title game appearance and even any sort of hope for a playoff berth. The big thing I'm looking for this week is, can the offense get off to a fast start? And can our defense get pressure on? I believe it's Eli Holstein. Eli Holstein, the quarterback for Pitt. Something for Clemson they were good at in their CFP run, I should say, I guess for 5 to 6 years there, was they were great at getting quarterback pressures and getting sacks, living in opponents' backfields. Well, this year it's kind of a little bit different where they're getting pressures here or there, but they're not completing the sacks. They're not completing the plays and living in opponents' backfields. That's something they've got to start doing more. They did a better job of it last week at Virginia Tech. But when they go to Pitt this week, I think that's going to be a big way to quiet that crowd, get some momentum going, kind of get Cade Klubnik calmed down. Because I think on the road he can get a little shaky at times and panicky. That's what we got to have is his defense has got to step up and make some big plays to get him settled into that environment. I think if he gets settled in, I think he could have a big day.
Yeah, definitely two interesting games to watch. Not too thrilled about Arkansas's matchup this weekend. We're just going to see what happens. Not too hopeful there as much as I love my team. With Texas coming down and what they've done, not too hopeful there. Maybe this is a game Arkansas can get up for, just similar to how, we were able to get the win over Tennessee. But I wouldn't want to bet on it. Texas, the spread 13.5. If we can keep it to that, I'll be happy. Especially after 2 weeks ago with getting 60 dropped on us by Ole Miss. Dillon and I talked about that last week after the show. It just wasn't a great showing. This Arkansas team's been up and down all season. You have one game, you look good. You come out the next week, look terrible. You come out and look good again. And I think the talent's there. I just don't know what's going on. There's people back and forth on the Sam Pittman train of, is it time to cut him loose? Do you give him another year? That's always the tough part. But, I'm not too excited about being in attendance for this game this weekend.
Well, I sure would love to see Arkansas knock them off. I sure would. That'd be just great chaos.
Oh, I would too. Not to mention you date back to the old Southwest Conference rivalries.
Yeah.
And, my dad tells me about it all the time. For the older generation, this is a big rivalry game. Even in his press conference today mentioned, he showed the team film from, several. I think the first game he showed them was from 69. He said the guys kind of just chuckled a little bit looking at the film and how, I guess grainy and not great footage it was, all the way up until the most recent matchup where we played them back in 21 here in Fayetteville and got the win. But that was a totally different Texas team than it is now. So. Well, before we get out of here, you guys want to let everybody know where they can find your show at, and times and things like that.
Man, take it away.
Sure. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you prefer to call it. We're on all those things, active all the time. So give us a follow, listen on those. We put out our episodes every Monday morning or Tuesday morning, typically. Breaking down the previous week's games, previewing the upcoming week's games on a weekly basis. So find us on those two pages, and we got our link in our link trees.
Yeah, we try not to play with too much fire on our picks. We only pick about like 4 games, 4 to 5 games at most. We try to keep it real simple, keep our confidence high. But yeah, right now we're in a tight race. I think we're tied,
Yeah, we are.
or like within 1 win loss, whatever it is. So yeah, it's getting to crunch time for us to see who's going to come out on top. I did terrible last year, so I'm trying to redeem myself.
Yeah, I think for me it's the other way around. I did great last year, and then this year, I think me and Dillon are tied for picks, but we're both sub 500 right now.
Yeah,
So
let me tell you something, boys. It's just not it's just not going the way I thought it was going to go. I've picked more losses than I have wins.
Oh, and that's how this college football season's been. But we can't wait for another great weekend of college football to see what happens this weekend. Because at this point, 11 weeks in, you never know what you're going to get. And we appreciate you guys joining us this week. And we'll be back here to recap any of the insanity that hopefully ensues in this week 12 of college football. But until then, we'll see you guys next week.